The first werewolf I ever saw was already dead in a pine tree, folded backward like a coat flung over a branch, with a neat, dark hole in its chest where the heart should have been. That was what froze me. Not the teeth, not the gray hands, not the blood-crusted black in the fur. It was how careful the feeding looked. Whatever killed it had not torn. It had opened. It had taken one thing. The snow under the body was hardly marked at all. Steam drifted up into the moonlight, and the air smelled like wet dog, cold iron, and apples gone bad in a cellar. I remember staring up at that body with my breath turning white in front of me. And I remember the one thought that landed in my head before I knew I was right. Something had eaten, and it was still hungry. This happened 12 winters ago in a logging town between two ridges and a frozen river so far north the cold settled into the walls and stayed. People from outside hear werewolf and picture old movies. Where I grew up, it was more like bad weather. Rare. Ugly. Real enough that folks planned around it. On round moon nights, curtains stayed shut, dogs came in early, and if you found tracks that looked almost human and almost wolf, you turned around and thanked God you had found them in daylight. We did not speak about it in a big way. That was one rule. Big talk made people careless. There were others. Do not follow crying in the woods. Do not go up the ridge when the moon is full. If the dogs refuse the yard, do not force them. And if somebody vanished for 3 nights and came back thin and ashamed, you left room for mercy before you asked questions. The moon-sick were out there. Sometimes strangers, sometimes not. Even with that hanging over us, life was still life. Men cut timber. Women worked a diner, the school, the post desk, the feed store. Kids flew down the church hill on sleds and came home wet and laughing. The town smelled like diesel, wood smoke, soup, and wet wool. When the windows glowed at dusk, you could almost believe the dark beyond the road was only dark. I lived over my uncle's old garage with my younger brother after our folks were gone. 2 rooms, a crooked table, a stove that popped at night. It was not much, but it was warm, and my brother made any place feel fuller than it was. He laughed with his whole chest. He whistled when he worked. He always slapped the door frame when he came in. Same spot, same rhythm. 3 soft taps before he even said hello. I still feel that sound in my bones. He was 6 years younger than me and hated being treated that way. He wanted to prove he could do every hard thing I could do. Track. Hunt. Fix engines. Stay out too late. He was strong and quick and brave in the reckless way kind people often are. Half my life back then was spent trying to slow him down without letting him feel me do it. The first wrong thing was small. So small I nearly forgot it. One night near the end of November, I was washing our bowls at the sink when I heard those 3 soft taps on the window above me. I smiled because I thought it was my brother fooling around outside. But when I looked up, the yard was empty. Fresh snow, still trees, no one there. Then I heard the stairs creak behind me and my brother came in from below, rubbing his hands and carrying in a gust of cold air. He asked why I looked pale. That was the moment the story really started, though I did not know it yet. A week later, 3 calves went missing from a farm south of town. 2 nights after that, somebody's hound was found in a ditch with its collar still on and its belly open wide. People muttered that it was moonsick work and spoke with that tired, angered country people use for storms and broken axles. Nobody liked it, but nobody panicked. Then the 4th calf came back, only the bones, stacked neat behind the barn as if somebody had cleaned them, sorted them, and set them there on purpose. The head was turned to face the house. Every bit of meat was gone, but there were no tooth marks on the long bones, no cracking, no wild mess. Just clean white ribs in the snow. That farmer came into town holding his hat in both hands and did not sit for almost an hour. Everyone saw him. Everyone knew. That was not moonsick work. The deputy came to me that same evening and asked if I would go up the ridge with him at dawn to read sign. I had been tracking since I was 14. In a place like ours, you either learn to read the woods or you learn to bury people. The trapper from the state line was already waiting by the pump with his pack and his old rifle. My brother heard us talking and said he was coming. I told him no. He came anyway. If I had fought harder, maybe things change. I think that a lot. We drove out before sunrise with the heater coughing more cold than warm and frost on the inside of the glass. The woods looked harmless in that gray light. Blue shadows. Snow bent over every branch. My brother nudged me in the back seat and grinned like we were boys sneaking off to fish. He had no fear in him then, only wonder. Sometimes courage is not strength. Sometimes it is simply not knowing yet what fear is for. We found the first sign half a mile past the farm line. At first I thought it was elk, because something big had moved through the brush and snapped young birch low. But the stride was wrong. Too long in one place, too short in another. The track sank deep, like the weight sat high instead of low. Long toes spread in a powder. Between some prints ran a thin line, as if something hard grazed the top of the snow as it walked. The deputy said it looked like a man wearing snowshoes made by the devil. The trapper did not smile. He looked uphill and said we were not following a killer. We were following something that killed killers. I laughed because my mind refused the thought. My brother did not. He pointed to a patch of scrub where the snow was torn up. In there we found moon-sick tracks, big ones, and every one of them pointed away. That was the first time my neck went cold under my coat. We kept climbing because men are very good at pretending a warning is only a trail. The higher we went, the quieter the woods got. No birds, no rabbits, just our steps and that sweet bad smell of fruit gone soft and blood on metal. By noon we found a bull elk in a draw. The hide was split from chest to gut. The ribs had been bent open, not chewed through. The organs were mostly gone except the stomach, which lay untouched in the snow. Around it were the same long tracks and the prints of at least 2 moonsick running hard. Gray fur clung to a branch. A finger bone lay in the churned snow. My brother bent to pick it up. The trapper caught his wrist and said, very low, do not touch what it leaves. That was the first real crack in the day. The trapper told us he had seen this once before in a valley far west. A pack vanished. Later pieces of them turned up, hearts gone, long bones stacked. Silver buttons spat into the snow. The old people there had a saying, where the moonsick fed, something older set the table. I wish he had not said that aloud. Some words make a place here, you. We should have turned back. Instead, we climbed until late afternoon and reached an old line shack buried in drift. The snow around it was packed with tracks, moonsick and otherwise, and there was blood on the latch. The deputy wanted to leave. The trapper wanted to stay and listen. My brother said he was fine. We stayed. Inside, the shack smelled like old smoke, wet wool and rotten wood. We lit the stove and barred the door. Outside, dark filled the trees so fast it felt poured in. We ate cold beans in silence until a sound drifted up from somewhere downslope. Not a howl, a cough trying to become a whistle. A little later, we heard a werewolf scream. If you've never heard a werewolf scream, be thankful. It is not a wolf sound with a man under it. It is pain dragged through a human throat. It rose too high and cut off all at once. Nobody moved. The trappers said it had made a kill. My brother asked how he knew there was only one. The trapper said because if there were more, we would not still be talking. Near midnight, something passed so close to the wall I heard snow whisper under its weight. The latch trembled once. Then came 3 soft taps beside my head. Tap, tap, tap. My brother made a tiny sound in his throat. The trapper lifted one finger to his lips and mouthed, "Do not answer." We sat there with our hands on our weapons and our breath held until the pressure outside eased and the steps moved off. By dawn, the snow around the shack was marked with prints too long for a wolf and too narrow for a bear, mixed with moon-sick sign going every which way, as if a fight had happened while we sat on the other side of the wall. We followed the fresh drag marks uphill and found the body in the pine. A full-grown werewolf, half changed when it died, gray fur mixed with skin, one arm more human than the other, and the face stuck wrong between both. It had been rammed up into the fork of the tree with such force the bark had stripped away. The chest was open. The heart was gone. One silver trap chain still hung from its rear leg. For some reason that chain hurt me more than the body did. It meant somebody had tried to save it once. Or hold it. Or love it enough to hope silver might matter. That was the moment I understood we were not dealing with some blind beast. A beast kills what it can. This thing was choosing. We went back to town with the chain and not much else. The diner went quiet when we came in. The moonsick were terrible, but they fit inside the world we knew. Whatever had killed that body in the pine had stepped over those rules like they were chalk on a floor. For 2 days a storm pinned us in town. Snow hid fences and swallowed the road to the ridge. I helped shovel roofs and haul wood, but mostly I watched my brother. He had gone inward. Twice I caught him staring out the sink window after dark. The second time he said he thought he heard tapping. When the storm broke, the world came out hard and bright and cruel. That afternoon the deputy brought word from a trap line near the old mine road. 3 snares torn free. A deer left untouched except for the liver. Tracks everywhere. Moonsick sign too. A whole pack moving fast toward town like something had gotten behind them and would not stop. That night, the trapper spread a map on our table and told us what he had kept back. In that western valley, the thing had not stopped with werewolves. It had taken dogs, deer, then a hunter who went after it alone. The old people there believed it followed the scent of the curse itself, as if moonsick blood gave off a light only it could see. My brother asked if it would come into a town. The trapper said if supper ran that way, yes. I should have sent my brother south that minute. Instead, I told him to stay inside after dark and not go anywhere without me. I thought walls mattered. The next wrong thing came before moonrise. We were bringing in firewood when the dogs next door began to whine. Not bark. Whine. My brother stopped on the steps and stared into the trees beyond the alley. I looked too and saw a low branch shake free of snow, not from wind, but from weight easing off it. Something was there. It moved back just enough for the dark to swallow it. We dropped the wood and got inside. I barred the door. My brother locked the back. The room felt too small all at once, full of stove heat and our breathing, and the tiny sounds old buildings make when they settle. Then came 3 soft taps at the kitchen window. Tap, 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 not loud, not angry, almost polite. My brother whispered my name. I looked. Frost had feathered the glass. In the one clear patch near the latch, something pressed and lifted away so fast I almost thought I imagined it. Not a face. Too long. More like the side of a skull with skin pulled tight. Then the tapping moved to the wall, the back window, the stair door. 3 soft taps at each place. I loaded the rifle. It did not come in. After a few minutes, the sound stopped. We waited a long time before either of us moved. My brother tried to joke, but his mouth would not hold it. When he rolled his sleeve to wash up, I saw the bandage on the inside of his forearm. I asked what happened. He said barbed wire. I said, let me see it. He said no. The room went so quiet I could hear the stove tick. When I stepped toward him, he backed up fast enough to knock his chair over. Then his face changed into shame. He sat hard, covered his mouth, and started crying in that silent, furious way grown men do. He told me it happened at the elk draw. While I was arguing with the deputy, something moved in the brush. He circled it. It sprang. Teeth scraped his arm and broke skin. The trapper burned it with liquor and made him swear not to tell me. I took the bandage off myself. 4 marks dark at the edges, angry red between, not deep, but not right. The skin around them looked bruised from inside. I think some part of me died before he did. The trapper came as soon as I sent for him. He asked the questions nobody wants to hear. Fever. Bad dreams. Me tasting sweet. Smells too strong. Anger rising too fast. My brother answered yes to too many of them. The trapper sat at our table for a long minute and stared at his hands. Then he said not every wound takes. Some sicken and live. Some turn for 1 moon and die. Some never turn at all. But if the thing in the trees was what he feared, it would know before we did. That was when I understood why it had tapped our windows. It was not hunting us. It was hunting my brother. And if you are still here with me, stay close now. I mean that. If this kind of story gets under your skin the way it gets under mine, subscribe if you want. Leave a comment if you need to, but do not drift away yet, because this is where everything we still loved was dragged into the open. The trapper said we had two choices: chain my brother before moonrise and pray the sickness passed, or take him far out and end it clean before the moon had a chance. I nearly hit him for saying it. My brother hit the table, hard enough to spill the lamp. He said he was not dead yet. He said he was still himself. He said if there was even one chance he could make it through, he wanted it. I looked at him and saw not a curse, not a danger, but the boy who slapped the door frame with 3 soft taps and grinned like winter could not touch him. So I chose hope. Maybe that was brave. Maybe it was selfish. I still do not know. We moved him to the root cellar under the feed store, because the walls were stone and the door was thick oak banded in iron. The deputy brought chain. The trapper brought a pair of old silver cuffs wrapped in cloth. My brother watched us without speaking. At last he asked me to do the last lock myself. His voice was steady. Mine was not. I told him I would open the door at dawn. He nodded and said if he begged me before then, I was not to listen. The worst part was how normal he looked while I chained him. Just pale. Just tired. He even tried to smile and asked if I would bring cards down if this took all night because he would get bored. That nearly broke me worse than the bite. Up above, the town held its breath. Folks had been told there was sickness in the feed store, nothing more. The moon rose behind cloud and then pushed clear, hard, and white as a cut bone. The trapper sat with his rifle across his knees. The deputy paced. I stayed by the cellar door because I could not make my feet leave it. At first we heard only chain shifting below. Then the breathing changed. Rough, deep, rough again, as if 2 lungs were taking turns inside one chest. My brother called my name once in a voice so normal I almost answered. The trapper shook his head before I could. A minute later my brother started praying in scraps our mother used to say when storms came and money ran thin. That stopped too. Then came the tapping. Not from below. From outside. 3 soft taps against the feed store wall. The deputy froze. The trapper stood. Another set came from the back door. Another from a high window. It was circling us, slow and sure, like a hand checking a trap. Something landed on the roof. Snow rushed down. Dust sifted from the rafters. Below us, the chains snapped tight, and my brother made a sound I will hear until I die. The deputy ran for the alley. The trapper shouted at him not to chase. He went anyway. I heard 2 steps, 1 curse, and then the street went silent. The trapper was through the door before I could stop him. I stood there 1 wild second with the moon on the floorboards, my brother breaking apart below me, and something older than both of us moving through the dark just beyond the walls. Then the deputy screamed. I ran. He was on his back in the alley between the feed store and the diner woodpile, 1 leg bent wrong, blood bubbling at his throat. The trapper knelt over him. I got there in time to hear the deputy whisper that he had come down the wall head first, like a spider, like a man who forgot how men move. Then the trapper looked up at the diner roof. I looked too. There it was, crouched on the edge above us with long arms locked straight, knees bent backward, head tilted with a bird's kind of interest. The moon caught one side of it. Pale hide, ribs, a jaw too long to be human and too flat to be wolf. Frost traced its spine like white hair. Its eyes were not bright. They were calm. Hungry in a calm way. Then it opened its mouth and spoke in my brother's voice from the cellar. Let me out. I fired without aiming. The shot tore wood from the roof. The thing moved so fast my eyes lost it. The trapper dragged me toward the store while the deputy drowned in his own blood behind us. I tried to turn back. The trapper hit me across the face hard enough to drop me to one knee. He shouted that if I went back, all three of us were dead. The cellar door stood open. The chain lay in two pieces on the floor. One silver cuff still locked to the post. The other gone. The metal had blackened as if held in a fire. There was blood on the steps and claw marks in the wood. Then, from somewhere beyond the mill, a howl rose into the night. Strong, new, full of pain and rage, and a voice I knew underneath both. I ran before the trapper could stop me. He caught up by the last house. We saw them on the mine road in the moonlight. First my brother, or what my brother had become, taller now. Shoulders bent, gray along the back. One arm hanging blood-wet from the broken cuff. Behind him came two other moonsick from the ridge, wild and half-starved, all three running not toward town, but away from it. Behind them, never hurrying, came the thing. It did not run like a wolf. It flowed, sometimes on two legs, sometimes on four, sometimes with one hand touching the ground like it was tasting the road. Every few yards it paused to lift its head and breathe, then kept coming, patient, sure, like it knew fear would tire its supper faster than claws ever could. We followed because love makes fools and grief makes worse ones. The trapper said the mine might bottle it. The old shafts were narrow, the beams rotten, the roof soft. Fire might do what bullets would not. I had no better plan. We cut through the trees to beat them there, branches whipping our faces, snow to the knee, the sounds ahead rising and fading through the dark. Werewolf cries, rockful, that dry coughing whistle, then silence. Then the sounds again, deeper now, trapped by stone. We reached the mine mouth just as one of the other moonsick burst back out covered in blood, not all its own. It saw us and swerved. The pale thing hit it in mid-air. One moment the moonsick was leaping past the timbers, jaws wide, and the next, the pale thing dropped from above the entrance and drove it sideways into the snowbank. Bones cracked. They rolled once. Then the creature tore into the chest with both hands and lowered its face into the opening. The sound it made while feeding was small and pleased, like a dog at a warm bowl. The trapper threw his lantern. Glass burst. Oil caught. Flame ran over bloody snow. The thing jerked back with a hiss that sounded too human. The trapper shoved another lantern into my hand and yelled that if I wanted any chance at my brother, it was now. I went in. The tunnel sloped down through a dark that ate the lantern light 10 feet out. Rusted rails still ran through the middle. Water dripped somewhere ahead. The walls were marked with long, fresh gouges crossing old pick scars. I found bits of gray fur, streaks of blood, and twice small pieces of silver spat onto the ground, black with slime. Farther in, the tunnel opened into an old sorting chamber, and that was where I found the nest. Bones everywhere. Deer, dogs, bear, moonsick, and human all mixed in heaps along the wall, not scattered, arranged. Skulls turned inward, long bones stacked by size. On one beam hung strips of hide drying like old leather. On another was a row of silver things the creature had rejected over the years. Bullets flattened by teeth, belt buckles, buttons, a child's spoon with a rabbit on the handle, and in the middle of that room crouched my brother. He looked up at me. I need you to understand this part. He was changed, fully. Fur through the face, hands turned to claws, jaw long, back bent, but his eyes were still his for one impossible second. Full of pain, full of effort, full of warning. He took one step toward me and then stopped, nose lifting past my shoulder. The thing was behind me. I threw the lantern without turning. Fire burst across the floor between us. The creature came through it anyway, all calm gone now, shrieking as it lunged. Up close it looked less like an animal than a bad thought the woods had kept feeding until it could stand. Skin stretched over knots of muscle, teeth like wet nails, fingers too many jointed to count right in a glance. Along its chest hung fresh strips of gray fur from the kill outside. It smelled like every dead place I had ever known. My brother hit it before it reached me. They slammed together so hard the support beam beside me shook. I fell against an ore cart and nearly lost the rifle. The two of them rolled through blood and firelight, one gray and furious, one pale and awful, tearing, biting, locking, breaking apart, coming together again. The pale thing was stronger. My brother was wilder. For a few breathless seconds, there was no room in the world for anything but claws on stone and bodies trying to open each other. Then the trapper came in behind me carrying a sack of old blasting powder from a tool cache near the entrance. The fuse was already burning. He shouted that the chamber roof was soft and we had one chance. I knew what he meant before he said it. So did my brother. He looked at me through blood and dust, and in that one ruined second he remembered exactly who I was. He drove the pale thing backward into the support posts. The trapper threw the powder under them. I screamed for my brother to move. He did not. He held on. The blast cracked the posts and woke the whole mountain. Stone came down in sheets. Dust punched the air from my chest. The trapper grabbed my coat and dragged me toward the tunnel while I fought him like a wild thing. Behind us, something roared. Then another voice answered it, lower and familiar. The rails jumped. The floor opened in places. I saw my brother once through the dust, arms locked around the pale creature, driving it deeper under the falling dark. Then the roof came in. When I woke, dawn was leaking through a gap at the mine mouth and blood had dried thick in my teeth. My shoulder burned. One ear rang. The trapper lay half buried by the entrance with a timber across his crushed leg. He was barely awake. He asked if I could hear him. I said yes. He said, then listen close. Sometimes the cursed are not the worst thing in the woods. Then he died. I dug until my hands split. With a shovel. With broken boards. With pieces of rail. With my bare hands when nothing else worked. Men from town came by noon. By night we had cleared enough to see the chamber had dropped into a deeper hole none of us could reach alive. We found gray fur in the rockfall. We found a strip of pale hide nailed to a splintered beam. We found blood from both. We did not find my brother. We did not find the thing either. That should have comforted me. It did not. I kept waiting for anger to save me from grief, because anger feels warmer and easier to carry. It never did. Every time I tried to hate him for hiding the bite. I remembered how young he looked with the chain on his wrist, trying to smile for me in that cellar light, and all the anger went soft again. The county men called it a cave-in after an animal attack. The deputy was buried. The feed store got a new door. People said as little as possible because that is how small towns survive. They lay boards over holes and learn to walk around them. By spring, the mine road washed out. By summer, the kids were warned away from the place, and that was that, at least for everybody who could still sleep. I stayed another year. Long enough to sell the garage, long enough to pack our things, long enough to learn the shape grief takes when it has nowhere honest to go. I would set out 2 bowls before I caught myself. I would wake thinking I heard him on the stairs. Sometimes I stood at the sink after dark and stared into the yard until my own face floated back at me in the glass like a stranger asking what I thought I was still waiting for. Then winter came again. One night, while the stove ticked and the room smelled like old coffee and wool, I heard it. 3 soft taps, not from the wall, from the doorframe, the exact spot my brother used to greet with his fingers. I sat there until my coffee went cold. Then I opened the door. Snow lay smooth on the landing. The trees stood black and still. Down by the road I saw tracks. One set belonged to something that had once been a man and was now too large to hide that fact. The other set, lighter and longer, crossed behind it for a while and then turned back into the woods. I left town in the spring. People ask why I kept this to myself for so long. The answer is ugly and plain. Because I do not know what I lost. If my brother died in that cave, then I failed him by chaining him, by chasing him, by believing I could hold back a moon with locks and love. If he lived, if some part of him crawled out and kept going under cold trees with that pale thing still somewhere behind him, then I failed him in another way. I survived. He did not get to be only one thing again. What haunts me most is not the tree or the roof edge or even the nest. It is the patience of it all. The tapping, the way the thing checked the walls before coming in, as if hunger could be polite. I had grown up thinking monsters were storms with teeth, curses that struck and raged. That winter taught me there are hungers that listen, hungers that learn the sounds we trust, hungers that stand outside warm houses and knock like they belong there. I still live in the north, though farther from those ridges now. I keep my windows covered on full moons out of habit, maybe out of faith in habits. I do not keep silver. I keep fire. I keep good locks. In a drawer beside my bed, I keep the old trap chain from the body in the pine. Wrapped in cloth I do not unwrap unless the snow comes early and my heart starts acting like it remembers things before my mind does. Some nights I drive farther up the highway than I mean to, pull over where the pines get thick, switch off the engine, and listen. I tell myself I am listening for wolves. That is not true. I am listening for a cough trying to become a whistle. I am listening for careful steps in deep snow. I am listening for 3 soft taps. A few winters after I left, stock started vanishing from farms 2 counties over. Not many. Never enough for papers or statemen. Dobbs went missing. Once, after a hard moon, a farmer found big gray tracks around his shed and another set crossing them. Pale prints sunk deep as if whatever made them carried hunger in its bones. He laughed when he told me and said maybe it was just 2 bears fighting. I laughed too. That is what people do when fear comes into a room. But his hands shook the same way my brother's shook in the line shack. There is no neat lesson in any of this. I cannot tell you evil lost. I cannot tell you love won. Love held on, that is all. It held on in a cellar. It held on in a mine. It held on long enough for 1 broken second of recognition in a face the moon had nearly taken. Sometimes that has to count. Sometimes it is all that counts. I also cannot tell you which thing I fear more now when the moon is full, the pale hunter that follows the curse, or the thought that somewhere in those dark trees my brother learned to follow it too, not as prey, not as man, but as something in between, always running, always hearing that patient thing behind him when the snow gets deep and the night goes white. Maybe that is why I'm telling you now, because secrets do not stay buried. Not in families, not in towns, not in mountains. They work their way up through the floorboards. They tap at the glass. They wait outside the light until somebody finally lets them in by speaking. If you ever find yourself in a cold place where people go quiet for no reason when the moon starts to round out, do not mock them. Watch the dogs. Watch the tree line. If you hear crying in the woods, leave it there. If you see tracks that look almost human and almost wolf, back away slow. And if something comes to your window in the small hours and knocks 3 times like it knows you, do not answer just because the sound feels familiar. Some things learn that on purpose. Last winter, after the first deep snow, I woke in the dark because the whole house had gone quiet in a strange way. Even the pipes seemed to be listening. I lay there counting my own breath until I heard movement outside the kitchen window. Slow, careful. A weight easing under the sill. My whole body went cold in one rush. I did not get up. I did not turn on a light. I waited. Tap, tap, tap. Then nothing. At dawn, the yard was smooth as paper. The wind had cleaned it in the night, but frozen into the porch frost was 1 coarse gray hair tangled with something white and fine I could not name. I stood there a long time with that little knot in my glove, feeling old fear and older love rise together until I could not tell them apart. I burned the hair in the stove and watched it curl black and vanish. Then I made coffee and sat by the window until the light was fully up, because sometimes the only thing a person can do with the dark is wait for enough day to see what it left behind. That is all I know. Maybe more than I want to, less than I need to. The woods do not care what names we give the things moving under the trees. They hunt. They flee, they feed, they listen, and now and then, if you are unlucky enough to hear it, they knock. I still listen for the 3rd tap.